So I say good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Hetty Jackson-Stops, and I run In Place of Strife alongside my mediation practice. I hope you are all keeping well in these extraordinary times. We thought it would be useful as we all get used to our new fully remote reality to give you an introduction to mediating online and to share some of our experiences of doing so. Just to let you know, this is being recorded so that we can share it more widely afterwards. With me today is Mark Jackson-Stops, who's going to share his experience of remote mediation. This is not designed as such to be a Zoom tutorial, because I didn't think we could better the tutorials that Zoom itself has on its website. This is more a chance for us to explain how Zoom can be used in the context of a mediation. We at IPOS are using Zoom to carry out mediation via video conferencing. We've chosen Zoom because we believe it best replicates a face-to-face mediation as closely as possible. The tips that we're about to talk about and the things we're about to talk to would probably apply to any form of video conferencing platform that you might choose to use. We'll spend about 15-20 minutes sharing with you our experiences. However, please feel free to ask any questions by using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screens, and we'll endeavour to answer those questions as we go along or at the end. I'm going to start by asking Mark to give us a bit of background to the most recent online mediation that he did. Mark, can you tell us how many parties were involved, where they were located, and how it went?
Good morning, everybody, and I hope you're all keeping pretty well. This was a two-party, pretty standard mediation, professional negligence, claimant team, defendant team. And the claimants had three people, the CEO of the organization, an expert, and their solicitor. And they chose to meet in their solicitor's office. And so they were sitting in one room together with a screen in the conference room. Now, with Boris's new rules, they wouldn't be able to do that. This was last week, and things changed very quickly, as you well know. In the other room as such, I had four people on the defendant side, the general counsel who had authority, a finance expert in-house, and two defense lawyers. And each of those four people were sitting in their own homes in front of their screens. And that worked really very well.
Mm. Can you talk about how it works on Zoom, how the mediation works, how the rooms work?
Okay, well, imagine the physical mediation. People arrive at the venue and they are put into their own breakout room physically. Well, you arrive on the Zoom mediation and I put you into your breakout room remotely. So take the four defense people who were all sitting in their own homes. When they arrived, I put them together in their breakout room, and that allowed them to have private conversations together during the course of the day, just as they would have been physically. And when I want to join them, I joined them, just like I would put my head round the door and say, is it convenient for me to talk to you? And when I want them then to come into a full meeting around the table, because so often that's what we do, then I close down the breakout rooms and I pull them into the main room with me. Again, I can allocate them back to their breakout rooms at the appropriate moment, and I can allocate different people to different rooms, let us say for lawyers' meetings, expert meetings, whatever. And we can have any amount of breakout rooms.
I've got a question here as to the waiting room, which is the precursor to the mediation. And could you explain that? The question is whether people can see each other in the waiting room.
Yeah, no, you can't. So when you're in the waiting room, you will have on screen, it might be Mark Jackson stops his mediation, or it might be the title of the case or whatever, and it will tell you that you are in the waiting room, and you will see nothing until the mediator invites you in. I'm in control. The mediator, the host, is in control and does all the allocations. So as I want you in the room, I bring you in, and then I allocate you to your room. And the great thing is, I think there's a little bit of a concern that somehow you're going to be confronted, or your client might be confronted with the counterparty. Now, that need never happen. In fact, you could have a mediation where the counterparties never meet during the course of the day. But I can come and go in and out of your room, in and out of their room, and I can have private meetings, as I said before, lawyer to lawyer, expert to expert, principal to principal even, depending.
Okay. There's a lot of, there are quite a few questions coming up about the privacy. How does the privacy work in regards to breakout rooms? How do you know that your private conversations aren't being overheard or listened to?
Well, on your screen, you will see who is in your room, and you can be certain that that is private. That is the basis on which this platform is developed. So that breakout room is for the people who are in it, and you will be able to see exactly who is in it, whether you have them on video or not. If they're only on by telephone, you'll see a box with their name in it, so you will know who is there. You will also be able to mute your own microphone at any time. You can stop your video at any time. So it's very flexible in that sense. You have a great deal of control, and you will know who you're talking to at all stages.
And another question that has come up and is, how do you get into a breakout room? How do you know, how do you ensure that you're not walking in on a confidential discussion? And I think this is not just from the mediator's point of view. The question is asking also from another attendee's point of view.
Yeah, well, that's because I'm in control. Mediators may be control freaks sometimes, but this does give me control. And it's for the parties to say, we would like to have a discussion with X or Y, or the mediator suggest, why don't you have a discussion with X or Y? And then the mediator has control of who is in which room at what moment. So you're really very secure. No other party is able to walk in on your room.
Yeah. And what about sorry, I'm reading lots of questions coming up, which is great because this is what we wanted it to be, an interactive session. Questions regarding how you know it's not being recorded.
As at the moment, I can see in the top left-hand corner of my screen a little red icon, and against it, it says recording, because we are recording this session. You will know if it's being recorded because you'll have that icon there. Of course, in a mediation, we are not going to record, ever. That is absolutely a no-no. So, but you'll be able to see if somebody surreptitiously does it. But again, the mediator is in control.
Okay, I'm going to just step back from the detail at the moment and just talk a little bit, we'll ask Mark to talk a bit about the technology. What do your clients need to take part in, how do they join an online mediation?
Yeah, this is in a way one of the joys of it, because you can use whatever device you wish. And I will send out an invitation. The invitation will have a link. You don't need to have downloaded any software, although you can download the Zoom app, but it's not essential to do that. And you join the meeting simply by clicking on the link. It is as simple as that. And you can do it on your telephone, you could do it on an iPad, probably best to do it on a laptop or a desktop, simply because you've got a bigger screen. and you might find it more user-friendly to do it that way. I was talking yesterday to a prospective, a claimant, a lay party, and we had a dry run, and he was on his telephone, his smartphone, and it worked extremely well. It was absolutely fine.
I know that there are some people watching this webinar on their smartphones, so it works in a similar way. And how, I mean, technology always has a few teething issues. What do you do to mitigate these ahead of the mediation day?
Well, the answer is to have a pre-mediation Zoom experiment, have a rehearsal. And I was doing exactly that yesterday with a party who has got a mediation booked and is coming up, bit skeptical about it. And I said, well, why don't you, the solicitor, and your client, and co-opt somebody else in the solicitor's office, actually working from home remotely, so that we've got a few people there. And I can show you, put some of you into a breakout room, show you how it operates, and put your minds at rest. It's so easy.
And what about if people start a mediation, you know, on the day they start the mediation, the technology fails, or there's concerns about it for one reason or another? Do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, well, at Place of Strife, we've decided that the way to set people's minds at rest here is to say, look, start the mediation. If for any reason you're uncomfortable with it, whether it's a technology reason or it's any other reason, then we'll adjourn it. And we'll adjourn it either to another date on which we do it remotely, where you've got to grips with the technology better, or we'll do it physically at a later date when Boris allows us to. And that's our guarantee, because there'll be no fee issue there at all. But, you know, I said that to people last week, and within, I would say, 10 minutes, they knew that this mediation was going to work.
Yeah. Does everybody, I'm getting lots and lots of questions, so apologies if I don't get to your question, but I will try to. Does everyone need to have a video connection?
It's much better to. It's better for your own purposes. To be seen when you speak is going to get your message over so much better. But it's not essential, and we can mix and match. There's no problem with that. We can use a combination of different links, different ways of communicating. It doesn't have to be all on the Zoom platform, but it's much better if it is, and it's dead easy in any event.
But somebody's asked what happens if you have a party who is untechy, can't use Zoom, or is, you know, elderly and isn't up to speed with such things. What can you do then?
Well, that's an interesting one, because I had a call from a solicitor a few days ago who said, our client is an 85-year-old lady. She's never used any modern technology in her life. How can we deal with that? Because she's isolated as well. And I simply said, you know, well, you just communicate with her by telephone, and we'll have you on the Zoom, that is the lawyers and anybody else who has to attend, experts or whatever, but you can do it by telephone communication. I don't think there's a problem with that, because that's probably what would happen with a physical mediation in any event, given the lady's frailty.
Yeah, thank you. Another question that's come in is, do you have any other tips about video conferencing?
Well, I think the only thing I would say is the better your connection, better a broadband connection with stable internet, that's going to help. Think about the camera and its placing. If you have bright daylight behind you, you're going to just be a silhouette. And, you know, it's so much better if the light is on the face, so people can see the expression and interact. Because what I've found is we can interact. We can interact almost as if we were sitting across a table from one another. It is that good.
Okay. I've got lots of questions here about the sharing of documents and settlement agreements, how they could be signed, how documents are shared, that sort of thing.
A lot of different options here. You can share them simply by sending emails to one another outside the Zoom platform. You can use the chat facility to attach documents to share within your group. You can, well, what I use, not often, but I have done, I used it yesterday, funnily enough, I use Dropbox, where you can scan a document and create a PDF and simply send it through as an attachment to an email. In terms of settlement agreement, we settled our case the other day, and the defendants had come with a template. They filled in the blanks and sent it across by email, and it was sent back by email with amendments, and then it was signed, scanned, and sent through by email. Now that is practically the same as you would do physically. And increasingly, I know, people are sending a settlement agreement from one room to another in the same building as you develop and agree the settlement agreement. So very little difference there. What we are doing more and more is using DocuScan, and we can use that for the mediation agreement as well, where people can do digital signature. Not everybody's up to that, of course, and there are different ways of handling that if we need to.
Somebody's asked in relation to sharing of documents, you may want to show a document, but not for the other side to have it. How can this be dealt with?
Yes, you can share documents on the screen. You can share your screen. If I was now to do so, I see at the bottom of my screen at the moment, I've got a share screen facility, and I can put the document up on my screen and use the share screen facility to do that. There's also the facility to have a whiteboard. For those who are committed to flip charts, I don't use flip charts a great deal. I do occasionally. I know others do a great deal, and there is a whiteboard facility which you can use and share with others. For those who are better at the technology perhaps than I am, I'm told that you can plug in an iPad to your computer and use it with a stylus to draw on it, write on it, put text onto it, and share that screen with others who are in the Zoom conference, either in your own room or elsewhere.
Okay. We've got lots of questions about the opening session. Can you see each other? How does this work?
Yes.
That sort of thing.
Yes. Okay. Well, after I've had my private meeting, as I always will, with individual parties in their breakout rooms, just as with the physical mediation, and assuming that we've all agreed that the process will include a roundtable session, a plenary meeting, then I close down the breakout rooms, and everybody comes into my room, the boardroom, if you like. Now, the only thing you may need to get used to there, you'll see everybody's faces as icons on your, what I would recommend as the gallery view that you can use. But they won't be in any particular order. You won't have defendant team on one side of the table and claimant team on the other side of the table. But people very quickly get used to that. And then once the plenary session is over, I reallocate you to your breakout rooms. And that works exactly like the physical.
Mm-hmm. I've had a follow-up question to that, which is how difficult is it in that joint session to discuss within your own team if you are in the communal room?
You can do that by chat. So it's a text chat which you can have with individuals privately within your own room. So that would be the way of doing it. But look, just as in a physical plenary session, you can simply say, we need to go and consult for a few minutes. Can we come back and join you again? And then I'd allocate you out of the room. Maybe only 2 of your team, let's say, of a team of 6. I might allocate the 2 of you out to a breakout room to have that chat that you need to have before bringing you back into the main room.
And some questions here about how, when people are in their private rooms, how does the mediator get it? How do they know when the mediator's coming in?
Well, when you're in your breakout room, you have an icon at the bottom of your screen, which is Ask for Help. And press on that, and the mediator has a signal coming up, a message coming up that says, breakout room 1 or defendant breakout room would like to see you. So I then join them. If on the other hand, then they haven't asked me, but I think, my goodness, they've been half an hour, what on earth are they doing? And we need to get on with this. Then I will join them. And at that point, it's just like me putting my head around the door and saying, are you ready to see me? And I'll say exactly that. Here I am. Are you ready to see me? And if you say, actually, we need another 5 minutes, I'll disappear again. And I'll say to them, please ask for help as soon as you're ready. And then I'll join you straight away.
Okay. What are there any tips on preparing differently for remote mediation compared to an in-person mediation?
I think the only thing I would say about the preparation, I don't think the preparation is any different, other than you might just want to have a little rehearsal with the Zoom platform, and your mediator would probably be very happy to help you with that. We certainly are. And it might be worth saying that all our mediators are trained in the use of this. We got ourselves up to speed mighty quickly when we realized that this is the way forward for us. And we've been practicing using each other as guinea pigs, and everybody has a jolly good grasp of it now.
Okay. Here's a tricky question for the mediator. What kind of measures could be taken to assure that when things might get heated, one of the parties won't just log off?
Well, that is a tricky one. I mean, I dare say there are 1 or 2 mediators involved in this, and you will know that it's not exceptional to have a case where you run down the stairs to stop people leaving. Or I've even stopped people in the street after they've left and said, please, I think it's worth your while and in your interest to come back. Whereas on this, somebody can simply press the button in the bottom right-hand corner that says leave meeting. And that might be done before I have a chance to say my piece and use my powers of persuasion. But, you know, I will have people's email addresses. I'll have their telephone numbers. And unless they have specifically said to me, please don't contact me, I'll use those ways of contacting people and continuing the discussion. And perhaps, who knows, I might be able to persuade them back into the meeting.
I'm just scanning down the questions. I've had another question asking if, when you said that the mediator is in control, does that mean that only the mediator has access to the controls?
You will have, as a party, certain controls. And 2 very important ones. Firstly, you can stop your video. And secondly, perhaps more importantly, you can mute your microphone. And I think that is probably important, that people do mute their microphones when they're not speaking, because that prevents background sounds transmitting to everybody. But when I say the mediator's in control, the mediator's in control of where people are, which breakout rooms they're in, and whether they can see each other and talk to one another. They're in charge of those controls, which are exactly what I do in the physical mediation. You know, I'm suggesting that you're in your room, or people come out of their room to meet one another. I do exactly the same.
Okay. I've got a question here from our good friend Denise. What things about mediating remotely work considerably better in practice than one might reasonably expect in theory?
That's typical Denise sort of left field, isn't it? I think that there is a temporary bonus in remotely mediating, in that it seems to generate a sense of collaboration. We're all in this together. This technology is really rather exciting. I had a reaction from one of the parties of last week, who mediates a lot, the solicitor acting for defendants. He said, "I can't think why we don't do this all the time." He was thinking about saving cost on travel, hire of rooms, meeting rooms, etc., etc. And whilst I sort of agree with that, I'm sure there are many, and particularly highly commercial cases, particularly where people are coming from great distances, where one might choose to do that even when there isn't a virus as there is now. But I think the physical just wins out because you can engage with the emotions perhaps a little bit more.
Thank you. I've had a concern about people, having to spend long periods of time sitting at their computers, and how does that work in the context of a mediation day?
Again, I think it's just similar to the physical. You've given up the day to try and achieve settlement for your client, and it's a commitment, and that commitment is to be most of the time sitting in a particular room, and in this context, it's sitting in your particular room, your own room in your own home, in front of the screen. I think for the mediator, probably to manage this, there's a little bit of extra in the sense that I probably will structure some breaks where people move around, go off and get a cup of tea. Lunchtime, I might be saying to them, why don't we break off at 1 o'clock for half an hour, 40 minutes? You tell me how long you need. So I think there might be a little bit more structuring to be done in that way by the mediator, but very similar to the physical.
I've had a slightly technical question involving if somebody drops off the connection, can they rejoin the mediation, or are they excluded forever?
Well, the only terribly minor glitch we had at my last mediation was General Counsel's computer kept dropping off. I think it may have been something to do with his internet or whatever, probably 4 or 5 times during the course of the day. And he then logged back on, no problem with that at all. He comes into the main room, which is only occupied, as it happened, by me. And at that point, I allocate him back to his breakout room with his friends. No problem.
We've had a few questions about how can the mediator both do the mediating and press all the buttons? Is it possible, or do you need somebody sitting by your side to do that?
I sort of feel I'm pressing all the buttons when I'm at a physical mediation as well. There's really very little difference. As it happened, last time out, I did have Hetty sitting with me because I had a little bit of concerns about using the technology and might have needed a bit of backup and help. But it turned out to be so easy that it's not a problem. You don't need an assistant necessarily at all.
Okay. What happens during, this is a question from the floor, so to speak, what happens during the in-between sessions? Do advisors stay connected with their clients throughout the day, or do we drop in and out?
Your choice, but when you're in a breakout room, you are with your clients just as you are physically. You might, of course, say to your client, I need to go off and do something else because we've got a break probably of 10 minutes, quarter of an hour. I need to go and do emails or whatever. And you can come back in. But all you have to do is mute your microphone and stop your video, and then unmute and unstop, and you're back. So, it's always, I always think that solicitors very often, it's a bit of a trial spending an entire day sitting in the same room with a client. But on this basis, I think you can come and go, and yet you are in the room and can be recalled at any time.
Yeah. Okay. I've got a question here about body language. How the question has asked, he's never been involved in online mediations, but is happy to be converted. I've always wanted to see the opponent's body language. Yeah. Is it, etc.? Because I think that's important.
Yeah, it's a really good question, that. And I'm going to tell you that when I had the claimant party sitting in a boardroom in the solicitor's offices, that was more difficult for me, and obviously also for the other side, than having the defendant side all sitting at their own separate computers, because they were at the end of a boardroom table. They were further away from the camera, and the lighting wasn't brilliant, and it's more difficult to pick up the nuances of the non-spoken. And everybody needs that. Everybody needs engagement. It's not just the mediator who needs to be able to read the body language. It's the parties as well. And so I would say better to have all parties with their own device, as many devices that there are people. And that is the best way of working it.
Okay. I've got a quick question here, which I can answer, Henry. The icons referred to, such as ask for help, aren't on my screen I'm looking at. Would that be different if I was invited by the mediator? And the answer is yes, because what we're in here now is a webinar, and we haven't invited you to a Zoom meeting, which is what we could have done and is what a mediator would do. They would host you in a Zoom meeting. Somebody's asked about your comment earlier about you can check in with the parties in breakout rooms to see how long they need. Yeah. Do you send them a chat within Zoom or an email outside Zoom?
I can do. I have a difficulty with sending you one within Zoom. I tend to enter your room, ask you whether you're ready to see me, and exit if you're not ready to see me. And you will know when I'm there, and you will know when I'm not there. So you'll know when you've got privacy, you'll know when you haven't. But yes, you can easily use email or text outside the Zoom platform as an additional form of communication.
Mm-hmm. Okay, here's a sort of more high-level question. To what extent do you consider that a remote mediation is less effective than a conventional mediation, as in one that takes face-to-face in one venue? And second part is, do you also consider that the current circumstances whereby increasing pressure is on the court system will give rise to an increase in remote mediations and other forms of ADR?
You'll have to give me the first part again.
Yeah. To what extent do you consider that a remote mediation is less effective than a face-to-face?
Yeah. I was thinking about this, and I'm going to put it as high as 95%, 90 to 95% as effective, the remote mediation. As for the second point, there might be a bit of an increase because people are becoming, and what this virus is doing to us, and the isolation is doing to us, is it's forcing us to adopt technology and become accustomed to it. And it's in a sense, it's a brilliant thing. I thought there might be some unexpected consequences of the virus, which would be good consequences. There are plenty of bad ones. But there will be some quite good ones. And I think this is one of them, that we will be far more accustomed to operating in this way. We can do it in many different ways. I had a game of bridge with my friends the other night where we were on an online bridge platform on the one hand, and we were on Zoom on the other, so we can continue with our banter that we usually have over the bridge table. So it's got a lot of different ways of application.
Do you think the virtual mediation can be quicker or longer than the face-to-face?
Very good question. the experience of the other day was, I think it was about the same. But if anything, I think it's likely to be a bit quicker. I think people might come to the point rather quicker. Perhaps cut shorter the sort of exploration time around the issues. Although we did a fair amount of that as well. You know, there's always this business of trying to analyze risk and persuade the other that they've got the risk analysis wrong and so on. I think it's about the same.
Mm. And it appears from our experience with our other mediators that's the case. We've had ones lasting full days. We've had them going on into the night. One of our mediators was still going to 1 a.m., which I gave him the silver lining to that, as he didn't have far to go to get to bed. I'm just looking through the questions now and just seeing if there's any other particulars. One question's come up as to the maximum number of participants in a remote mediation, and that is, it's a huge number. It's more than, I think it's 100 at least. So
the most participants that I've had in a mediation, which I co-mediated, I think, with Alistair, was 63. So, you know, we on this platform you can have hundreds.
Yeah.
So there's no limit, and there's no limit to the to the number of breakout rooms either. You know, we can appoint different people to different breakout rooms ad nauseam.
And we're just coming to the end of the questions in our time, but I've got one more here. How do we deal with maintaining full attention? Might there be a risk that during a lengthy session people might feel isolated from the process? And how do we keep teams engaged if we were all in the same room together?
Again, I don't think that's so very different to the physical. You know, you're going to, let's say you're a team of 6 people in your breakout room. You will have the 6 people there, and you can engage with one another, you know, even if you're waiting for responses with no valuable work to be done while you wait. You can all engage with one another, or you, as I said before, you can close down your video and mute your microphone, and you're then a sort of a ghost presence in that room until such time as you want to engage with one another. For both you solicitors acting for your clients and for me as mediator, well, we sort of have a duty to keep the clients, the decision makers, engaged in the process. And that's a challenge we face, I think, whether it's remote or whether it's physical.
Mm. And I think last question on that's been amended to take account of remote mediation.
Actually, just demonstrating how the technology isn't always completely perfect. I missed half of that question.
Talking about the mediation agreement and how whether it has been amended to take account of remote mediation. Yeah,
we have amended. We have a mediation agreement for remote mediation. It's only a small amendment, which instead of requiring those with authority to be present, which indicates sort of physical presence, it allows present by video conferencing, telephone, or whatever other means. So relatively modest amendment to the mediation agreement, and yeah, I think that's all that's necessary.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Mark, for all your thoughts on this, and thank you everybody for getting so involved and such an interactive discussion. I don't know, Mark, whether you had any final tips. I was thinking more about food and drink.
Well, you're always thinking about food and drink. But just something to say that, you know, I thought I had a very lucky opportunity to mediate last week remotely. And since then, In Place of Strife mediators have been doing valuable work on the same platform ever since. And all the reports back have been absolutely brilliant. Hetty referred to the one went on till 1:30 in the morning. And I can tell you that there was a party in Philadelphia. There were people around the globe with that one. I know that we had another very successful one yesterday and a couple earlier in the week. So, you know, it really is working, and our mediators are way up to speed with this. So it's going to work for people. And this is not just a means of dealing with cases that have been already booked. I would just urge people to get on and book mediations just as you always have. Don't be inhibited and say, oh, well, let's wait, not book it until we can meet physically. Let's just get on with it. And if by the time it arises, we're allowed to get back together, we'll do that.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, thank you. Thank you. And I hope everybody's found this useful. We've got more information on the website, including a client guide to remote mediation, which might be useful for solicitors to pass on to their lay clients. There'll be a recording of this on the website. I'll put a link up by the end of tomorrow. And be assured that if you do book with any of our mediators, they will run you through the technology beforehand, and you can practice as much as you like with them so that you're fully assured when it comes to mediation day that you're up and running. Or do get in touch with me. You've all got my email address. Do drop me an email if you've got any questions. And in the meantime, do stay safe and well. Look after yourselves, and thank you very much for joining. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.